The glass-walled corner office on the 48th floor of downtown Boston's most prestigious building had always been Oliver Crawford's sanctuary. Today, it felt like a prison. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection ghostly against the city sprawl below as his assistant's words echoed in his head. "Mr. Crawford, it's about your brother." 20 minutes later, Oliver sat behind his mahogany desk, his usually immaculate tie loosened, staring at the email confirming what he'd just heard. Richard Crawford and his wife Lauren had died in a car accident on Interstate 95. The brother he hadn't spoken to in 10 years was gone, taking with him any chance of reconciliation. Oliver's fingers hovered over his keyboard, muscle memory trying to pull him back to work, his default response to any emotional disruption. But for once, spreadsheets and quarterly reports couldn't save him from the tsunami of feelings threatening to breach his carefully constructed walls. "Sir?" His assistant Patricia appeared in the doorway. "The funeral home in Providence is waiting for your decision about the arrangements." Providence. Of course, Richard had stayed in their hometown, while Oliver had escaped to Boston, building his empire and convincing himself that success could fill the void of family. Richard had remained rooted in the place that held all their shared memories. "Tell them I'll handle everything personally," Oliver said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Cancel my meetings for the next 3 days." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. In 5 years, she'd never heard him voluntarily clear his schedule. "Of course, sir. And there's one more thing." She hesitated, clutching a folder to her chest. "The family lawyer called. He says it's urgent that you meet with him before the funeral. It's about Richard's daughter." Oliver's head snapped up. "Richard's what?" "His daughter, sir. Sophie. She's 6 years old." The world tilted on its axis. A niece. He had a niece he'd never known about, and now she was... "The lawyer mentioned something about guardianship," Patricia added softly. Oliver stood abruptly, his chair rolling back to hit the wall. "Get me everything you can find about Richard's life from the past 10 years. And Patricia, not a word about this to anyone." After she left, Oliver loosened his tie completely and pulled it off, dropping it on his desk. He turned back to the windows, but instead of the familiar comfort of his domain spread out before him, all he could see was his own reflection, and for the first time in years, he really looked at himself. He saw a stranger in a $3,000 suit, a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. A man who had let pride and stubbornness cost him a decade with his only brother. A man who now had to face not only his grief, but also the responsibility of a child he'd never met. The drive to Providence 2 days later was a journey through memories he'd spent years suppressing. Each mile marker seemed to peel back another layer of the armor he'd built around himself. By the time he pulled up to the funeral home, his hands were clenched so tight around the steering wheel that his knuckles had turned white. The funeral director, a somber man named Henderson, greeted him with practiced sympathy. "Mr. Crawford, we've arranged everything according to your specifications, but there's someone you should meet first." He gestured to a small office off the main corridor. Inside, a woman in her early 30s sat next to a little girl with honey blonde hair and Richard's eyes. Oliver's heart stopped. The girl looked up, and in that moment he saw his brother's face so clearly it took his breath away. "Uncle Oliver?" Her voice was tiny, uncertain. The woman beside her, a social worker he assumed, touched Sophie's shoulder gently. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart? This is your father's brother." Oliver had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but he had no idea what to say to this small person who carried his brother's eyes. He cleared his throat. "Hello, Sophie." She studied him with an intensity that made him want to loosen his tie again. "Daddy had a picture of you on his desk, but you didn't smile in that one either." The simple observation hit him like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Henderson appeared again. "Mr. Crawford, the service is ready to begin." The next 2 hours passed in a blur. Oliver delivered a eulogy that felt hollow despite its perfect structure and carefully chosen words. He watched as distant relatives and friends he didn't recognize shared stories about a version of his brother he'd never know. And through it all, he felt Sophie's eyes on him, asking questions he wasn't sure he could answer. After the service, Richard's lawyer, Martin Wells, pulled Oliver aside. "We need to discuss Sophie's situation immediately." They gathered in the same small office as before, but now Sophie was gone, taken by the social worker to get something to eat. Wells pulled out a document that would change Oliver's life forever. "Richard and Lauren's will is very clear," Wells explained. "In the event of their deaths, they named you as Sophie's legal guardian." Oliver's world narrowed to a pinpoint. "That's impossible. They didn't even know me anymore." "Richard updated the will every year," Wells said quietly. "He never changed the guardianship designation, not once." The implications of that trust, that forgiveness, threatened to shatter Oliver's composure entirely. "I don't know anything about children. I can't—" "You can," Wells interrupted, "and you must, unless you want Sophie to end up in the system." Oliver closed his eyes, seeing Richard's face in his mind, not as he'd last seen him, angry and hurt, but as he remembered him from their childhood, protective, brave, always looking out for his little brother despite their 6-year age gap. "She'll need help adjusting," Wells continued. "The social worker recommended finding a child specialist or teacher who can assist with the transition. Someone who can provide emotional support while you—" he paused diplomatically, "while you adapt to your new role." Oliver opened his eyes, decision made. He would approach this like any other challenge. Identify the problem, find the resources needed, and execute a solution. "Find me the best person for the job. Money is no object." As he left the funeral home that evening, Oliver saw Sophie waiting by the social worker's car. She held a worn, stuffed rabbit under one arm and clutched a photograph in her other hand. Even from a distance, he could see it was the picture from Richard's desk, the one where he didn't smile. Looking at her small figure silhouetted against the setting sun, Oliver realized that for the first time in his adult life, he was facing a challenge that his money, power, and carefully controlled emotions couldn't solve. He needed help, and he needed it fast. That night in his hotel room, Oliver made 2 calls. The first was to Patricia, instructing her to begin preparations for a child to live in his penthouse apartment. The second was to Wells, authorizing him to find someone who could help Sophie, and by extension, Oliver himself, navigate the unfathomable path ahead. What Oliver didn't know, as he finally allowed exhaustion to claim him, was that the person Wells would find would change not only Sophie's life but his own in ways he could never have imagined. Anna Mitchell stood at her classroom window, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the Providence skyline in shades of gold. The empty chairs and quiet atmosphere of her 3rd-grade classroom always filled her with a mix of peace and possibility. This was her sanctuary, a place where children's dreams took flight, and where even the most wounded souls could find healing. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her reflection. The number wasn't familiar, but something made her answer instead of letting it go to voicemail. "Ms. Mitchell, this is Martin Wells, a family lawyer here in Providence. I apologize for calling so late, but I have an unusual situation that requires someone with your particular expertise." Anna's interest piqued. As both a teacher and a certified child trauma specialist, she occasionally consulted on sensitive cases. "How can I help, Mr. Wells?" "I have a 6-year-old girl who just lost both parents in a car accident. She's being placed with her uncle, but he's—" Wells paused, choosing his words carefully. "He's somewhat unprepared for the responsibility. We need someone who can help both of them adjust." "The uncle has no experience with children?" "Oliver Crawford runs one of the largest technology companies in Boston. He's brilliant at business, but—" Wells sighed. "Let's just say emotional intelligence isn't his strong suit." Anna's mind raced. She knew the type. Driven, successful, probably viewing emotions as inconvenient obstacles to be overcome. "And the little girl?" "Sophie. She's bright but understandably traumatized. Her uncle is her only living relative willing to take her, but their first meeting was challenging." Anna walked to her desk where children's drawings covered one wall, visual testimonies to the power of patience and understanding. "What exactly would you need from me?" A complete change of scenery, actually. The position would require you to relocate to Boston, at least temporarily. Mr. Crawford is prepared to offer a very generous compensation package, including housing. Anna sat down, her mind already calculating. Her lease was month to month, and the school year had just ended. Still, Mr. Wells, I need to be clear about something. If I take this position, my priority will be Sophie's emotional well-being. That might mean challenging her uncle's methods or expectations. That's exactly why we need you, Ms. Mitchell. The social workers are concerned about Mr. Crawford's rigidity. We need someone who can help Sophie heal while teaching him how to be a parent. After discussing the details, Anna promised to think it over and call back the next day. But as she drove home that evening, she knew she'd already made her decision. Something about this situation called to her. Not just Sophie's need, but the challenge of helping someone like Oliver Crawford understand that raising a child required more than logistics and schedules. The next morning, Anna walked into Wells's office where she found herself face to face with Oliver Crawford himself. He stood by the window, his expensive suit and commanding presence making the modest office feel somehow smaller. When he turned, Anna was struck by the contradiction in his eyes, determination warring with barely concealed panic. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, professional. "I understand you're qualified to help with Sophie's transition. Please call me Anna." She met his gaze steadily. "And yes, I specialize in helping children process trauma and change. But Mr. Crawford—" Oliver, she corrected. "I need you to understand that helping Sophie means working with both of you. Are you prepared for that?" His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to fulfill my brother's wishes." "That's not what I asked." Anna surprised herself with her directness, but something told her Oliver Crawford responded better to straightforward communication. "Are you prepared to learn and change for Sophie's sake? Because children don't need perfect guardians. They need present ones." For a moment, Oliver's corporate mask slipped, revealing a flash of vulnerability that vanished so quickly Anna almost doubted she'd seen it. "Ms. Mitchell, Anna, I have no idea how to be a parent. But I refuse to fail my brother again. Whatever it takes, whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." Anna studied him, seeing past the polished exterior to the lost man beneath. "Okay then, when do we start?" The answer came in the form of Sophie herself, who chose that moment to enter the office with her social worker. She clutched her stuffed rabbit closer when she saw Oliver, but her eyes lit up with interest when she noticed Anna. "Sophie," Oliver said stiffly, "this is Ms. Mitchell. She's going to be helping us in Boston." Anna knelt to Sophie's level, smiling warmly. "Hi, Sophie. That's a very special rabbit you have there. Does he have a name?" Sophie glanced at Oliver before answering quietly. "Hoppy. Daddy gave him to me." "Well, Hoppy looks like an excellent friend." Anna's voice was gentle. "Would you like to know a secret? I have a special friend too, a teddy bear named Mr. Buttons. Maybe Hoppy and Mr. Buttons could be friends." A tiny smile flickered across Sophie's face, the first Oliver had seen since meeting her. He watched in barely concealed amazement as Anna drew Sophie into a conversation about stuffed animals and favorite stories, slowly but surely breaking through the shell of grief that had enclosed the little girl. Later, as they finalized the arrangements, Oliver pulled Anna aside. "How did you do that? Get her to open up?" "Children need to feel safe before they can start healing," Anna explained. "Right now, everything in Sophie's world has changed. She needs to know it's okay to still be herself, to still love what she loves, even though her parents are gone." Oliver processed this with the same intensity he usually reserved for market analyses. "And you can teach me how to help her feel safe?" Anna saw the genuine fear behind his question, fear of failing, of causing more damage, of not being enough. "Yes," she said softly. "I can teach you. But you have to be willing to learn things that won't fit into a spreadsheet or a business plan. Are you ready for that?" Oliver looked over at Sophie, who was showing her rabbit to Wells with the first signs of animation she'd displayed in days. I have to be, he said simply. As Anna left the office that afternoon, having agreed to move to Boston the following week, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far more complex than a simple job. She had seen something in Oliver Crawford's eyes when he looked at his niece, not just duty or obligation, but a desperate desire to do right by her, even if he had no idea how. What she didn't know yet was that this assignment would challenge everything she thought she knew about healing, family, and the capacity of the human heart to change. As she drove home to pack up her life in Providence, Anna Mitchell had no way of knowing that she wasn't just signing up to help a grieving child and her emotionally distant uncle. She was stepping into a journey that would transform all three of their lives in ways none of them could imagine. Oliver's penthouse in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood had always reflected his personality: minimalist, pristine, and meticulously organized. Standing in the foyer now, watching movers carry in boxes of children's furniture, he barely recognized his own home. The sleek modern space was transforming before his eyes into something foreign and chaotic. The bedroom down the hall should work well for Sophie, Anna said, directing the movers with quiet efficiency. She'd arrived that morning, taking charge of the transition with a calm competence that both impressed and unsettled Oliver. It gets good natural light, and the view of the Charles River might help her feel less confined. Oliver nodded, trying not to wince as a box labeled "Toys" was carried past his prized abstract sculpture. The designer can have everything set up by tomorrow. I've arranged for... Actually, Anna interrupted gently, I think we should let Sophie help arrange her room. It's important for her to feel some control over her new space. Oliver's jaw tightened. That could take days. Yes, Anna agreed, meeting his gaze steadily. That's kind of the point. Sophie needs time to process this change. Making her room her own space is part of that process. Before Oliver could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Sophie entered with her social worker for the final handoff. The little girl's eyes went wide at the expansive space, her grip on Hoppy tightening as she took in the floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings. Welcome home, Sophie, Anna said warmly, crossing to kneel beside her. Would you like to see your new room? We thought you could help us decide where everything should go. Sophie looked uncertainly at Oliver, who stood awkwardly by his Italian leather sofa. Can Hoppy have his own spot? Of course, Anna assured her. Hoppy is family too, right? Oliver caught the gentle emphasis on the word family and cleared his throat. Yes, we can. Make arrangements for the rabbit. The social worker completed the final paperwork, and then it was just the three of them. The silence that followed her departure felt heavy with unspoken questions and fears. Perhaps we should establish a schedule, Oliver suggested, reaching for his phone. I've researched several suitable private schools in the area and... Oliver, Anna cut in, her voice kind but firm. Sophie just got here. Why don't we take today to just get settled? Sophie, would you like to help me unpack some of your things? Sophie nodded, some of the tension leaving her small shoulders at Anna's suggestion. As they headed toward the bedroom, Oliver called out, What about lunch? I can have my assistant order. Why don't we make something together? Anna suggested. Sophie, do you like making sandwiches? Mommy used to let me put the cheese on, Sophie said quietly, the first voluntary information she'd offered about her parents. Oliver watched them disappear down the hallway, feeling simultaneously relieved at Anna's capable handling of the situation and completely useless. He retreated to his home office, telling himself he needed to check on some urgent business matters. An hour later, a knock on his office door startled him from a conference call. Anna stood in the doorway, her expression gentle but determined. We're about to make lunch. Sophie asked if you would help. Oliver glanced at his laptop screen where 3 more urgent emails had just arrived. I have several pressing. Oliver. Anna's voice was soft but carried an undeniable weight. Your niece is asking for you. These first few days will set the tone for your entire relationship. What message do you want to send? The question hit him like a physical blow, echoing with memories of his own father's constant absences and endless pressing matters. With a decisive click, Oliver closed his laptop. In the kitchen, he found Sophie perched on a stepping stool Anna had somehow procured, carefully arranging slices of cheese on bread. The sight of her small hands performing such a mundane task with intense concentration made something twist in Oliver's chest. "Uncle Oliver," Sophie said, looking up at him with uncertainty. "Anna says you can put the tomatoes on, but you have to wash them first." Oliver Crawford, who hadn't prepared his own meal in over a decade, found himself at the sink washing tomatoes under his niece's solemn supervision. Anna moved around them both, subtly orchestrating their interaction while appearing to focus on gathering plates and napkins. "Daddy liked lots of tomatoes," Sophie offered suddenly, watching Oliver slice the fruit with unpracticed care. "He said they were good for your heart." The knife slipped, nearly catching Oliver's finger. Richard's voice echoed in his memory. "You work too hard, little brother. It's not good for your heart." The last words they'd exchanged before the decade of silence. "Your father was right," Anna said smoothly, noting Oliver's distress. "Sophie, why don't you tell your uncle about your favorite sandwich toppings?" The lunch preparation continued, a strange dance of grief and tentative connection. When they finally sat down to eat, Oliver was struck by how foreign it felt to have others at his usually empty dining table. Sophie's feet dangled from her chair, not reaching the floor, while Anna maintained a gentle flow of conversation that required minimal response, but kept the silence from becoming overwhelming. After lunch, Anna suggested they all help Sophie unpack some of her things. Oliver found himself carrying boxes into the bedroom that would no longer serve as his minimalist guest room. Sophie's presence was already transforming it, with Hoppy presiding over the proceedings from a place of honor on the bed. "This was in Daddy's study," Sophie said suddenly, pulling a framed photograph from a box. Oliver's breath caught as he recognized it, a much younger version of himself and Richard at a Red Sox game, both grinning widely at the camera. He hadn't known his brother had kept it. "You're smiling in this one," Sophie observed, touching the glass carefully. Anna watched the interaction closely, noting how Oliver's hands trembled slightly as he took the frame. "Where would you like to put it, Sophie?" she asked gently. "Can it go by my bed, so Daddy can say goodnight?" Oliver's throat tightened. "Yes," he managed. That would be fine." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of unpacking and arranging. Anna masterfully involved both Sophie and Oliver in the process, creating small moments of connection while respecting the raw grief that hovered just beneath the surface. By evening, the room had transformed into a space that somehow balanced Sophie's needs with Oliver's aesthetic, a physical representation of the bridge they were trying to build. As Oliver prepared for bed that night, he heard soft voices from Sophie's room. Anna was helping her settle in, the gentle murmur of their conversation a foreign but not unpleasant sound in his usually silent home. He found himself standing in his own doorway listening. "Remember, I'm just down the hall," Anna was saying. "And your uncle is right next door if you need anything. Will you be here tomorrow too?" Sophie's voice was small, fragile. "Yes, sweetheart. I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that. We're all going to figure this out together, okay?" Oliver stepped back into his room, Anna's words echoing in his mind. Together. It was a concept he'd abandoned long ago, along with the smile in that old photograph. Now, standing in his changed home with his brother's daughter down the hall, he wondered if perhaps it was time to learn it again. What he didn't realize was that this first day was just the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, family, and the true meaning of home. As he lay in bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of others moving in his space, Oliver Crawford had no way of knowing that his carefully ordered world was about to be permanently, irrevocably, and wonderfully disrupted. The first crisis came exactly 1 week after Sophie moved in. Oliver woke to the sound of his phone buzzing at 4:45 a.m., an emergency board meeting about a potential hostile takeover of one of their subsidiary companies. He dressed quickly, muscle memory guiding him through his pre-dawn routine, mind already racing with strategies and counter moves. It wasn't until he reached the elevator that he remembered, Sophie. He couldn't just leave. But this meeting could determine the fate of thousands of jobs, millions in revenue. Cursing under his breath, he pulled out his phone to text Anna. Her response came immediately. "I'm awake. Go. But we need to talk about establishing protocols for these situations." The meeting stretched through breakfast and into the morning. Oliver was in his element, commanding the room with the cold precision that had made him famous in corporate circles. But something kept nagging at the edges of his concentration. Had Sophie eaten breakfast? Would she be upset that he disappeared without saying goodbye? His phone buzzed with a text from Anna. "Sophie's asking about you. When should we expect you?" Oliver glanced at the faces around the conference table, the stack of documents still to be reviewed. "Can't say. Critical situation." He paused, then added, "Is she okay? She's worried you left like her parents did." The words hit him like a physical blow. Oliver stood abruptly, startling his CFO mid-sentence. "Take an hour. Review sections 7 through 12. We'll reconvene at 11. The drive home was a blur of breaking speed limits and running yellow lights. He found Sophie and Anna in the building's rooftop garden, another of Anna's innovations. His niece sat on a bench, listlessly pushing around pieces of a puzzle. "Sophie," he called out, slightly breathless from taking the stairs when the elevator felt too slow. She looked up, her small face brightening, then immediately clouding with uncertainty. Oliver recognized the expression. It was the same one Richard used to wear when their father would disappear for days on business trips. "I had an emergency at work," he explained, moving closer. "But I should have said goodbye." "You looked like Daddy did when he was worried," Sophie said quietly. "He had the same face when he was talking about the big meeting. Before." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken grief. Oliver felt rooted to the spot, the weight of his brother's final days pressing down on him. Anna stepped in smoothly. "Sophie helped me plant some herbs this morning. Would you like to show your uncle what we did, sweetheart?" As Sophie led him to a small collection of pots explaining each plant with careful precision, Oliver caught Anna's eye over his niece's head. The message was clear. They needed to talk. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Anna confronted him in his home office. "We need to establish better communication protocols. Sophie's still traumatized from losing her parents. Every unexpected absence triggers that fear." Oliver ran a hand through his usually immaculate hair. "I can't just abandon my responsibilities. The company is not more important than your niece's emotional well-being." Anna cut in firmly. "I'm not saying you have to choose between them. I'm saying we need to create systems that allow you to manage both." "Systems," Oliver repeated, latching onto the familiar corporate terminology. "What do you suggest?" "First, we create a morning routine that's sacred. Breakfast together no matter what, even if it's only for 15 minutes. Sophie needs that consistency." Oliver thought of his father's empty chair at countless breakfast tables. "Agreed. What else?" "A communication schedule. If you have to leave unexpectedly, you call or video chat with Sophie at set times throughout the day. And we prepare her in advance for days when you know you'll be particularly busy." As they hammered out the details, Oliver found himself studying Anna's face in the soft lamplight. She approached Sophie's emotional needs with the same methodical thoroughness he applied to business strategies. But there was something else there, a deep well of compassion that transformed mere procedures into meaningful connections. Their new systems were tested the very next day, when Oliver's presence was demanded at an emergency shareholders meeting. This time, he woke Sophie before leaving. "I have to go to work early today," he explained, perched awkwardly on the edge of her bed. "But I'll call you at lunch and we'll have dinner together. Maybe." He glanced at Anna, who nodded encouragingly. "Maybe we could try making pasta?" Sophie hugged Hoppy closer. "Promise you'll call?" "I promise." The words felt weighty, significant. "And Sophie? I'll always come back." The day unfolded in a complex dance of corporate firefighting, interspersed with video calls where Sophie showed him her drawings and told him about the birds she'd seen in the rooftop garden. Each interruption should have felt like a disruption to his workflow, but somehow they became anchoring points, reminders of something larger than profit margins and market shares. That evening, the kitchen descended into chaos as they attempted to make pasta from scratch. Anna's idea, which Oliver had initially dismissed as unnecessarily complicated. Flour dusted every surface, and Sophie's delighted giggles filled the air as Oliver struggled with the pasta maker. Daddy wasn't good at cooking either, Sophie observed, watching him rescue another mangled attempt at fettuccine. He always ordered pizza when Mommy worked late. Instead of the usual stab of pain, Oliver felt something warm bloom in his chest. What was his favorite kind? As Sophie launched into a detailed description of Richard's peculiar pizza preferences, Oliver caught Anna watching them with a soft expression he couldn't quite decipher. She quickly looked away, focusing on helping Sophie feed another piece of dough through the pasta maker. Later that night, after they'd finally eaten their imperfect but somehow satisfying meal, Oliver found himself in his office again. But instead of diving into work emails, he was Googling easy recipes to cook with kids, while occasionally glancing at the family photo Sophie had insisted on displaying next to his laptop. His phone buzzed with a message from his COO about another potential crisis brewing in their Asian markets. Oliver stared at it for a long moment, then typed a response he never would have considered 2 weeks ago. Handle the initial response. I'll review in the morning. Family dinner is non-negotiable. As he sent the message, he heard Sophie's laughter floating down the hallway, followed by Anna's warm voice reading a bedtime story. The sounds should have felt like an intrusion in his carefully ordered world. Instead, they felt like something else entirely, something he wasn't quite ready to name. But that made his usual solitude seem suddenly less appealing. What Oliver didn't realize was that this day marked a subtle but significant shift in his priorities. The man who had once measured his worth in stock prices and merger deals was beginning to understand that some investments couldn't be quantified in quarterly reports. As he listened to the gentle rhythm of Anna's storytelling voice, Oliver Crawford was starting to learn that sometimes the biggest returns come from the smallest moments, like imperfect pasta and promised phone calls kept. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, its heavy cream envelope stark against Oliver's digital inbox. Providence Elementary School graduation ceremony, it read. Sophie's former classmates would be moving from first to second grade, and her teacher had thought she might want to attend. Oliver found Anna in the rooftop garden, helping Sophie water the now thriving herb plants. He hesitated, watching their easy interaction. Over the past 3 weeks, the garden had transformed from a sterile decorative space into a vibrant sanctuary. Much like his apartment below, he realized. Anna, he called softly. Could we talk? She caught his tone immediately. Sophie, sweetie, why don't you count how many new basil leaves we have? Remember how we counted yesterday? Once Sophie was absorbed in her task, Anna joined Oliver by the roof's edge. He handed her the invitation wordlessly. Ah, she said, understanding flooding her features. This could be good for her, Oliver. Closure is important. But returning to Providence, he watched Sophie carefully counting leaves, her lips moving silently. Won't it trigger more trauma? Actually, avoiding places connected to her parents can be more damaging in the long run. It's about facing memories in a controlled, supported way. Anna studied his face carefully. But that's not what's really bothering you, is it? Oliver gripped the rooftop railing. Richard's house is still there. All their things, he hadn't been able to deal with it yet, had been putting off the inevitable task of sorting through his brother's life. Uncle Oliver, Sophie called out. We have 12 new leaves today. That's 3 more than yesterday. That's excellent counting, Sophie, he responded automatically, his mind still in Providence. Anna touched his arm lightly, the contact sending an unexpected warmth through him. You don't have to handle everything at once, but Sophie needs to say goodbye to her friends, her school, and maybe... She hesitated. Maybe you need to say goodbye too. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Oliver found himself looking through old emails on his phone. He scrolled back years, finding the last messages he and Richard had exchanged. They were cold, professional, arrangements for their father's funeral. He hadn't even opened Richard's final email, sent a week before radio silence descended between them. With trembling fingers, he opened it now. Oliver, I know you think I'm throwing my life away by leaving the company. Maybe you're right. But I have to follow my heart on this. I'm going to be a father, Oliver, I just found out. I don't want my child to grow up thinking success matters more than happiness like we did. I miss my little brother. Rich. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Anna stood in the doorway, 2 mugs of tea in hand. Sophie's finally asleep. She had questions about tomorrow's video call with your Boston office. I think she's worried about interrupting something important. Oliver set his phone down, accepting the tea gratefully. I've been thinking about what you said, about the graduation. And I want to go, for Sophie, but... He met Anna's eyes. Would you come with us? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. Anna took a careful sip of her tea before responding. Of course. Sophie will need both of us there. Both of us, Oliver repeated softly. When had that become such a natural concept? The next few days passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Anna helped Sophie pick out a dress for the ceremony, while Oliver found himself making arrangements to visit Richard's house afterward. The lawyer had been asking about it for weeks. Decisions needed to be made about the property and its contents. The morning of the graduation dawned bright and clear. Oliver watched Sophie carefully choose a hair ribbon to match her dress, struck by how much she looked like Lauren, his sister-in-law, in certain angles. Anna hovered nearby, helping with buttons and offering quiet encouragement. The drive to Providence felt shorter than Oliver remembered. Sophie sat in the back seat, Hoppy clutched tightly in her arms, while Anna kept up a gentle stream of conversation about the landmarks they passed. Oliver caught glimpses of them in the rearview mirror, his niece's face pressed against the window, Anna's gentle smile as she listened to Sophie's observations. The school parking lot was crowded with familiar cars. Parents Oliver had never met, but who had been part of Richard and Lauren's daily life. Sophie's steps slowed as they approached the building. "Look who's here," a voice called out. Sophie's former teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, hurried over. "We've missed you so much, Sophie." Oliver watched as his niece wavered between shyness and excitement at seeing her teacher. Anna's hand found Sophie's shoulder, providing silent support. "And you must be Sophie's uncle," Mrs. Reynolds said warmly. "Richard spoke of you often." The comment caught Oliver off guard. "He did?" "Oh, yes. He had your company's achievements framed in his office. He was so proud." Oliver felt Anna's presence beside him, steady and grounding as Mrs. Reynolds continued chatting. His brother had been proud of him, even after their falling out. The ceremony itself was a blur of small children singing songs and receiving certificates. Oliver found himself studying the parents around them, their casual comfort with this world of school performances and childhood milestones. How had Richard navigated this? Had he felt as out of place at first as Oliver did now? "Uncle Oliver," Sophie whispered during a quiet moment, "can we show Anna my old classroom after?" "Of course," he managed, his throat tight at this first voluntary inclusion in her memories of this place. After the ceremony, they walked the familiar halls, Sophie pointing out her old cubby, her favorite reading corner. At one point, she stopped suddenly, staring at a wall of student artwork. "That one's mine," she said quietly. "Daddy helped me hang it." The drawing showed 3 figures, clearly Richard, Lauren, and Sophie, standing in front of a house. In the corner, barely visible, was a 4th figure, slightly apart from the others. "Is that—" Oliver started. "That's you," Sophie confirmed. "Daddy said we should include you because you're family, even if you were far away." Oliver felt Anna's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. He gripped it like a lifeline. Later, standing in Richard's driveway, Oliver looked up at the modest colonial house where his brother had built the life he'd chosen over corporate success. Sophie had fallen asleep in the car, emotionally exhausted from the day. "We don't have to do this today," Anna said softly. Oliver shook his head. "No, it's time." He turned to her, still processing the revelations of the day. "Thank you for being here, for—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything he couldn't quite express. Anna's smile was understanding. "That's what family does, right?" Family. The word echoed in his mind as they walked up the front path together. He thought of the fourth figure in Sophie's drawing, of Richard's framed article about Oliver's success, of the last email he'd never answered. Standing on his brother's porch, Oliver realized that maybe Richard had understood something he was only now beginning to learn. That success without connection was the poorest kind of wealth. As Anna turned the key in the lock, Oliver felt something shift inside him. They weren't just here to pack up his brother's life, they were here to understand it, to honor it, and maybe, just maybe, to learn from it. What he didn't know yet was that the biggest revelations were still to come, waiting in the quiet rooms of the house where Richard had chosen love over legacy. The inside of Richard's house felt frozen in time. Coffee mugs still sat by the sink, waiting to be washed. A jacket hung carelessly over a kitchen chair. Lauren's gardening magazine lay open on the coffee table, its pages marked with sticky notes about spring planting. Oliver stood in the entryway, overwhelmed by the weight of interrupted lives. Anna moved past him quietly, her presence anchoring him to the present moment. "Should we wake Sophie?" she asked softly. Oliver shook his head. "Let her sleep in the car a little longer. I should see it first." Understanding flickered across Anna's face. "I'll stay with her, take your time." Moving through the house felt like walking through a museum of what-ifs. The kitchen wall displayed Sophie's growth chart, marking heights and dates in Richard's careful handwriting. School artwork covered the refrigerator, held by magnets from places his brother had visited, including Boston, Oliver realized with a start. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step carrying him deeper into the life his brother had built without him. The master bedroom was neat, but lived in, with family photos covering the dresser. Oliver recognized some faces from the graduation ceremony, friends who had become Richard's chosen family in Oliver's absence. Richard's home office drew him like a magnet. The door creaked open to reveal a space that was quintessentially his brother, organized chaos with books stacked in seemingly random but purposeful piles. A familiar corporate award caught his eye, and Oliver moved closer to examine it. It was his, the Innovator of the Year award he'd received 5 years ago. Richard had kept a news article about it framed on his wall, along with other clippings tracking Oliver's success. Below them, a collection of unsent letters filled a drawer, each addressed to Oliver in Richard's distinctive scrawl. With trembling hands, Oliver opened the most recent one, dated just 2 months before the accident. "Dear Ollie, Sophie asked about you again today. She saw your picture in the business section and wanted to know why her uncle lives in the sky. Your office building impressed her. I told her you're not really in the sky, just in a tall building in Boston helping people build amazing things. I wish you could see her, little brother. She has Mom's laugh and Dad's curiosity, but she has something else too. This incredible capacity for joy that reminds me of you before. Well, before everything changed, I keep thinking about calling. Every time I see your name in the news, every time Sophie asks about you, I pick up the phone. But what would I say? That I'm sorry? That I miss you? That I wish I could bridge this gap between us before it's too late? Maybe someday we'll—" The letter ended there, unfinished. Oliver sank into Richard's chair, the paper crumpling slightly in his grip. A soft knock at the door made him look up. Anna stood in the doorway, Sophie's sleepy form held in her arms. "She woke up asking for you," Anna explained quietly. "I thought, maybe it's better if we do this together." Sophie rubbed her eyes, taking in the familiar room. "This is Daddy's special place. He wrote stories here." "Stories?" Oliver managed. Sophie wiggled down from Anna's arms and moved to a shelf, pulling out a leather-bound notebook with the certainty of routine. "He wrote about when you were little, about Grandma and Grandpa. He said it was important to remember." Oliver accepted the notebook with reverence. Inside, he found not just stories, but a detailed family history Richard had been compiling for Sophie. Pages of memories, photographs, and reflections chronicled their childhood, their parents' lives, and even Oliver's achievements, all carefully preserved for his niece. "He wanted me to know everything," Sophie explained, climbing onto Oliver's lap with a familiarity that would have terrified him a month ago. "About our whole family, even the sad parts." Anna moved closer, her hand coming to rest on the back of Richard's chair. "Your daddy wanted you to understand where you came from," she said gently. "All the people who helped make you who you are." Oliver found himself reading aloud from the notebook, sharing stories of his and Richard's childhood adventures. Sophie listened intently, occasionally adding details Richard had told her, creating a bridge between past and present that made Oliver's chest ache with a peculiar mixture of grief and gratitude. As the afternoon light began to fade, they moved through the house together, Sophie acting as guide to her old life. Each room held memories she wanted to share, treasures she needed Oliver and Anna to understand. Her old bedroom was a time capsule of early childhood, filled with toys and books that each had a story attached. "Can we take some things home?" Sophie asked, hugging a worn teddy bear that had clearly been a faithful companion. The casual way she referred to Oliver's apartment as home didn't escape his notice. "Of course," Anna answered before Oliver could formulate a response. "We should take anything that helps you remember the happy times with your mom and dad." Oliver found himself studying Anna as she helped Sophie sort through belongings, deciding what to keep and what to save for later. Her intuitive understanding of Sophie's needs amazed him, knowing exactly when to encourage memory sharing and when to redirect when emotions ran too high. In the kitchen, they discovered a recipe box full of Lauren's handwritten cards. Sophie's face lit up at the sight of it. "Mommy's special recipes. She was teaching me to cook." "Maybe," Oliver said slowly, surprising himself, "we could try making some of these together, in our kitchen." The smile Sophie gave him was worth every burned pasta attempt and flour-covered counter in his future. Anna's expression when he caught her eye held something that made his heart skip. Pride, understanding, and something else he wasn't quite ready to name. As they packed the car with carefully chosen treasures, Oliver made one last trip to Richard's office. He gathered the unsent letters, the notebook of family history, and the framed news clippings. These weren't just relics of his brother's life. They were pieces of a bridge Richard had been trying to build, even in silence. "Ready?" Anna asked when he returned. Sophie already buckled in the back seat with Hoppy and her expanded family of stuffed animals. Oliver looked back at the house, at the life his brother had built and lost. "Not really," he admitted quietly, "but I think I'm getting there." The drive back to Boston was quieter than the morning's journey, each of them processing the day's discoveries in their own way. Sophie fell asleep clutching her mother's recipe box, while Anna hummed softly to the radio, her presence a steady comfort in the passenger seat. At a red light, Oliver found himself watching them both in the rearview mirror. His unexpected family, pieced together from loss and hope and trying. Richard's voice seemed to echo from the pages of his notebook. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves, little brother." As they pulled into his building's garage, Oliver realized that for the first time since receiving the news of Richard's death, he felt something like peace. Not because the grief was gone, but because he was finally beginning to understand what his brother had been trying to tell him all along, that true wealth wasn't measured in corporate acquisitions or market shares, but in the connections we forge and the love we choose to give. What he didn't know yet was that this understanding would soon be tested in ways he couldn't imagine, as the carefully constructed balance of their new life faced its first real challenge. The summons from Child Protective Services arrived exactly 1 month after Sophie moved in. Oliver found it in his morning mail, the official letterhead stark against the granite countertop of his kitchen island. His coffee grew cold as he read and reread the contents, his hands growing increasingly unsteady. "Uncle Oliver, you promised pancakes." Sophie's voice carried from the hallway, followed by the sound of her footsteps and Anna's gentle laugh. Oliver quickly tucked the letter into his suit jacket just as they entered. Sophie wore the apron Anna had bought her, already covered in flour despite the early hour. The sight, which would have horrified him weeks ago, now barely registered against the weight of the letter burning in his pocket. Anna showed me how to crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, Sophie announced proudly. Want to see? Actually, sweetheart, Anna interrupted, having caught the tension in Oliver's stance. Why don't you start measuring the flour? Remember how we practiced? Once Sophie was occupied, Anna moved closer to Oliver. What's wrong? He shook his head slightly, eyes darting meaningfully toward Sophie. Later. The morning routine continued with forced normalcy, but Oliver's mind raced. Someone had filed a complaint about his fitness as a guardian. The letter mentioned concerns about his work schedule, his lack of parenting experience, and, most painfully, questions about whether his lifestyle and priorities were suitable for raising a child. After breakfast, as Sophie gathered her things for their planned trip to the Boston Children's Museum, Oliver pulled Anna aside in his office. Read this, he said, handing her the letter. Anna's expression darkened as she scanned the contents. A hearing? Next week? She looked up sharply. Who would file this complaint? I have some ideas, Oliver said grimly. Richard's wife had a brother, Matthew. He opposed my guardianship from the start, but the will was clear. He's been quiet until now. Oliver, Anna hesitated. These accusations about your schedule and lifestyle, they're not entirely baseless. A month ago I was different, he cut in, then softened his tone at her expression. I know I'm not perfect, but Sophie is everything to me now. You've seen that, right? The vulnerability in his voice made Anna step closer. Of course I have, and we'll prove it to them. We? Did you think I wouldn't stand with you on this? She touched his arm gently. I'm a certified child specialist, remember? My testimony about Sophie's progress could help. Oliver felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. Thank you, he managed. A knock at the office door interrupted them. Sophie stood there, museum backpack already on. Are we still going? You promised we'd see the bubble room. Oliver glanced at his watch, then at the letter on his desk. A month ago he would have canceled immediately, buried himself in preparation for the hearing. Now, of course we're going, he said firmly. I always keep my promises to you, remember? The museum turned out to be exactly what they all needed. Watching Sophie's delight in the bubble room, Oliver found himself relaxing despite the morning's shock. Anna stayed close, her presence reassuring without being obvious about it. Uncle Oliver, look, Sophie called, creating a bubble large enough to stand in. It's like a force field. Very impressive, he agreed, catching Anna's smile at his enthusiastic tone. When had it become so natural to engage with Sophie's discoveries? Later, as they watched Sophie explore the construction zone exhibit, Anna spoke quietly. We should start gathering evidence, documentation of your involvement in her daily life, her emotional progress, the stability you've provided. Oliver nodded, watching Sophie successfully complete a building challenge. I have Richard's letters now too, the ones from his office. They show he trusted me, wanted me in Sophie's life even when we weren't speaking. Good. And we can ask Mrs. Reynolds from her old school to testify about Sophie's adjustment. Anna paused. Oliver, there's something else we should consider. What? My role in all this. Matthew might try to use my presence against you, suggest you're delegating the actual parenting. Oliver turned to her, suddenly fierce. Your family. You're not an employee. You're... He stopped, caught off guard by the intensity of his own reaction. Anna's eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, Sophie ran over. Can we get lunch in the museum cafe, please? Daddy always let me have the special rocket ship sandwich. The mention of Richard sent a pang through Oliver's chest, but it was different now, bittersweet rather than purely painful. Tell me about this rocket ship sandwich, he said, leading them toward the cafe. Over lunch, Oliver watched Sophie chattering about the exhibits, her happiness a stark contrast to the withdrawn child who'd first entered his life. She had Anna's sauce-wiping technique down perfectly, he noticed, and had adopted his habit of arranging food groups separately on her plate. Little pieces of both of them, melded with her own personality and her parents' memory. The thought of losing her was unbearable. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Oliver and Anna sat in his office reviewing documentation. The space had evolved over the past month, Sophie's drawings now sharing wall space with market projections, a few of her stuffed animals permanently residing on the leather couch. "Look at this," Anna said, pulling up her phone's photo gallery. She had dozens of pictures documenting Sophie's progress, playing in the rooftop garden, baking with Oliver, reading together on the couch. Daily evidence of a loving, stable home life. Oliver studied a photo of himself and Sophie making Lauren's cookie recipe, both of them covered in flour and laughing. He barely recognized himself. "I was so wrong," he said quietly. "About what?" "When you first arrived, I thought this was a problem to solve, a situation to manage." He met her eyes. "I never imagined that you'd fall in love with being a father, that I'd fall in love at all," he said, the words slipping out before he could catch them. The silence that followed was electric. Anna's breath caught audibly, and Oliver found himself unable to look away from her face, watching emotions play across it like light and shadow. A small sound from the hallway broke the moment. They turned to find Sophie in her pajamas, clutching Hoppy. "I had a bad dream," she whispered. "About Daddy and Mommy leaving again." Oliver moved immediately, gathering her into his arms with a naturalness that would have astounded him a month ago. "Want to tell me about it?" As he carried Sophie back to bed, Anna trailing behind them, Oliver felt a fierce certainty settle over him. He would fight for this, for Sophie, for the family they were becoming, for all of it. Matthew and his accusations didn't stand a chance against the truth of what they'd built here. What Oliver didn't know was that the hearing would test more than just his legal right to Sophie. It would force him to confront everything he thought he knew about family, love, and what it truly meant to be a father. As he tucked Sophie back into bed, his unspoken words to Anna still hanging in the air between them, he couldn't have imagined how the next few days would change everything. The family court building loomed before them, its stone facade cold and imposing in the morning light. Oliver adjusted his tie for the 10th time, a gesture Anna had come to recognize as nervous rather than perfectionist. "Remember what we discussed?" she said softly, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Just be honest about your journey with Sophie. The court needs to see the real you, not the CEO." Sophie sat between them on the courthouse bench, swinging her legs and clutching Hoppy. They'd debated whether to bring the stuffed rabbit, but Anna had insisted it would help Sophie feel secure during her interview with the court-appointed advocate. "Mr. Crawford?" A clerk appeared. "They're ready for you." Oliver knelt before Sophie. "Remember what we talked about? You're going to stay with Ms. Wilson for a little while, and she's going to ask you some questions about living with me and Anna." "Like show and tell at school?" Sophie asked, her small fingers gripping Hoppy tighter. "Something like that." Oliver managed to smile. "Just be honest, okay? Like Anna taught us." As Sophie left with the child advocate, Oliver felt Anna's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. The gesture steadied him, grounding him in the present moment rather than the 1,000 worst-case scenarios his mind had been spinning. Inside the courtroom, Matthew Hansen sat with his lawyer, his expression hard as he watched Oliver enter. The last time they'd met had been at Richard and Lauren's funeral, where his hostility had been barely contained. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Patricia Ramirez, began by reviewing the case details. Oliver listened as Matthew's lawyer laid out their concerns, his long work hours, his lack of parenting experience, his supposed emotional detachment. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Mr. Crawford has essentially outsourced the actual parenting to a hired caregiver, demonstrating his inability to personally connect with the child. Oliver felt Anna stiffen beside him. Before he could respond, Matthew was called to testify. My sister Lauren would be horrified, Matthew stated, his voice thick with emotion. Sophie needs a normal family environment, not a corporate penthouse with rotating staff members. She needs stability, tradition, memories of her parents. Objection, Oliver's lawyer interrupted. Speculative statements about the deceased's wishes. Sustained, Judge Ramirez agreed. Please stick to factual observations, Mr. Hansen. When it was Oliver's turn to testify, he forced himself to forget the practiced responses they'd rehearsed. Instead, he pulled out Richard's notebook. My brother kept this, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. It's full of our family history, stories he wanted Sophie to know. He wrote about our childhood, our parents, even my achievements. Things I thought he'd forgotten or resented. He described finding the letters in Richard's office, the news clippings, the evidence that his brother had never given up on him. Then he pulled out his phone. This is my calendar from 2 months ago, he said, showing the screen. Meetings, deals, networking events. This is it now. He swiped to reveal a different schedule entirely. Sophie's school tours highlighted in yellow, cooking lessons in green, museum visits and doctor appointments carefully noted. I'm not the same person I was when Sophie came into my life, Oliver continued. I've learned that being successful doesn't just mean running a company. It means being there when she wakes up from nightmares about losing her parents. It means learning to make her mother's recipes, even when I burn them. It means understanding that sometimes board meetings have to wait because she needs to tell me about a new leaf in our garden. The judge leaned forward. And Ms. Mitchell's role in all this? Oliver glanced at Anna, drawing strength from her presence. Anna isn't my employee. She's family. She taught me how to be a father when I was terrified of failing. She helped Sophie trust again when grief made her withdraw. She showed us both how to be a family. Matthew's lawyer stood. Yet you pay her salary. Not anymore, Anna interjected, surprising everyone. I resigned from my paid position last week. I stay because Sophie needs both of us and because... She paused, meeting Oliver's stunned gaze. Because we've become a family. The child advocate's report came next. Ms. Wilson described her interview with Sophie, noting the child's improved emotional state compared to initial assessments after her parents' death. Sophie spoke at length about her new home, Ms. Wilson reported. She described her rooftop garden where she grows herbs like her mother did. She talked about making her father's favorite cookies with her uncle. Most importantly, she expressed feeling safe and loved. During a brief recess, Oliver found Anna in the courthouse corridor. You resigned? When? After the museum, she said softly. I realized I couldn't testify honestly about our family while accepting payment for being there. Our family, Oliver repeated, the words sending warmth through his chest. Before he could say more, Sophie came running down the hall, Hoppy bouncing in her arms. Uncle Oliver, I told Ms. Wilson about our pasta disasters in the garden and how you always kiss my forehead twice at bedtime like Daddy did. Oliver scooped her up, his throat tight. You did great, sweetheart. Can we go home now? Sophie asked, yawning. I'm tired of grown-up stuff. Soon, Anna promised, smoothing Sophie's hair. The judge just needs to talk a little more. When court resumed, Judge Ramirez reviewed her notes carefully before speaking. Mr. Hansen, your concern for your niece is admirable. However, this court's primary interest is Sophie's well-being. The evidence shows that Mr. Crawford, despite his initial inexperience, has created a nurturing, stable environment where Sophie is thriving. She turned to Oliver. Mr. Crawford, your transformation from corporate executive to devoted guardian is commendable. More importantly, you've demonstrated the wisdom to seek help when needed and the humility to learn and grow for Sophie's sake. The judge's final ruling felt almost anticlimactic after the emotional testimony. Oliver retained full guardianship, with provisions for Matthew to have regular visitation if he desired it. Outside the courthouse, Sophie dozed in Anna's arms while Oliver spoke briefly with Matthew. I know you were trying to protect her, Oliver said quietly, but I promise you I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how loved she is by all of us. Matthew studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. Lauren always said Richard never gave up hope that you'd find your way back to family. Looks like he was right. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Oliver found Anna in the rooftop garden. She stood at the railing looking out over the city lights. "Did you mean it?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "About being family?" "Every word." She turned to face him. "Oliver, these past weeks." He closed the distance between them, one hand cupping her face gently. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me how to love." Their first kiss was soft, tentative, full of possibility. When they broke apart, Anna's eyes shimmered with tears and laughter. "Sophie's going to say 'finally' when we tell her." Oliver chuckled, drawing her close again. "She's a very perceptive child." What they didn't know then was that this moment, sweet as it was, marked not an ending, but a beginning. The real challenge would lie not in winning the right to be a family, but in learning how to build one together day by day, love by love, moment by precious moment. The morning after the custody hearing, Oliver woke to the sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. He followed the noise to find Sophie and Anna attempting to make French toast, a light dusting of cinnamon and sugar covering every surface. "Uncle Oliver," Sophie called out, her face lighting up. "We're celebrating. Anna said special days need special breakfast." Oliver caught Anna's eye over Sophie's head, remembering their kiss in the garden. She blushed slightly but held his gaze, a soft smile playing at her lips. "Special days definitely need special breakfast," he agreed, moving to join them. As he passed Anna, he let his hand brush against hers, the simple contact sending warmth through him. "Can Anna stay with us forever now?" Sophie asked suddenly, focused on dipping bread in egg mixture. "Since the judge said we're a real family?" Oliver nearly dropped the coffee mug he'd just picked up. He and Anna hadn't discussed what would happen next, hadn't had time to define their changing relationship. Anna recovered first. "Sophie, honey, relationships between grown-ups can be complicated, but no matter what, I'll always be here for you." "But you love each other," Sophie stated matter-of-factly with the clear logic of a child. "I see it when you look at each other, like Mommy and Daddy used to." Before either adult could respond, Oliver's phone rang, his COO calling about an urgent situation with their West Coast expansion. The timing couldn't have been worse. "I have to take this," he said apologetically. "Go," Anna nodded, understanding. "We'll save you some French toast." In his office, Oliver tried to focus on the crisis at hand, but his mind kept drifting to Sophie's words. She was right. He did love Anna. The realization wasn't shocking. It felt like acknowledging something he'd known for weeks. The corporate crisis took most of the morning to handle. When he finally emerged from his office, he found Anna alone in the living room, reviewing school brochures for Sophie. "Where is she?" he asked, sitting beside her on the couch. "Napping." The excitement of the past few days caught up with her. Anna set down the brochures. "Oliver, we should talk about what happens next." "I love you." The words came out before he could second-guess them. Sophie was right. I love you, and not just because of how amazing you are with her. I love who I've become because of you, who we are together. Anna's eyes glistened. I love you too. But this isn't just about us. Sophie's been through so much change already. We need to be careful about. A crash from Sophie's room interrupted them. They rushed to find her thrashing in her bed, caught in a nightmare. "No, don't go," she cried out. "Mommy, Daddy." Oliver reached her first, gathering her into his arms while Anna sat beside them, running a soothing hand over Sophie's back. "We're here, sweetheart," Anna murmured. "You're safe. We're right here." Sophie's eyes flew open, tears streaming down her face. "I dreamed everyone was leaving again. First Mommy and Daddy, then you and Uncle Oliver." "Listen to me," Oliver said firmly, holding her close. "Anna and I aren't going anywhere. We're a family now, remember? The judge made it official and everything. Promise?" Sophie hiccuped, clutching both their hands. "Promise." they answered in unison. Later that evening, after Sophie had calmed and finally fallen into peaceful sleep, Oliver and Anna stood in the doorway of her room, watching her chest rise and fall steadily. "Move in officially," Oliver said quietly. "Not as Sophie's caregiver, but as part of this family. As my partner." Anna turned to him. "Are you sure? It's fast, and your board already has concerns about your changing priorities. Let them be concerned." Oliver led her to the living room where they could talk without disturbing Sophie. "The past few months have taught me what really matters. I'm not saying we have to rush anything, but I know what I want. Who I want in my life." "There would be talk," Anna warned. "People might say I planned this, that I manipulated my way." Oliver silenced her with a kiss. "Let them talk. We know the truth. Sophie knows the truth." A noise from the kitchen interrupted them. They found Sophie sneaking a cookie from the jar, looking guilty but determined. "I had another bad dream," she admitted. "But a small one this time. Anna says cookies help with small bad dreams." "Does she now?" Oliver raised an eyebrow at Anna, who shrugged unapologetically. "It's scientifically proven," she said with mock seriousness. "Would you like to participate in our research, Mr. Crawford?" Soon all three of them sat at the kitchen island, sharing cookies and milk in their pajamas. Oliver watched Sophie demonstrate her cookie dunking technique to Anna, who listened with exaggerated attention, and felt his heart swell with love for both of them. "I have an idea," Sophie announced suddenly. "Since Anna's staying forever now, maybe we could make her room into something else, like a library. She could sleep in your room, Uncle Oliver." Oliver choked on his milk while Anna burst out laughing. "Sophie," Anna managed, still giggling, "remember what we said about relationships being complicated?" "Grown-ups always say that," Sophie sighed dramatically. "But it's not complicated. You love each other, you love me, we're happy together. What's complicated about that?" Looking at Anna over Sophie's head, Oliver had to admit his niece had a point. The business world might be complicated, board politics might be intricate, but this felt simple. "Right. You know what?" he said, reaching for Anna's hand. "Sophie's right. It's not complicated at all." The next few weeks passed in a blur of changes. Anna gradually moved her things in, donating her furniture to a women's shelter and transforming Oliver's stark guest room into a cozy home office. Sophie helped organize Anna's books, creating a reading corner in the living room that quickly became their favorite spot for bedtime stories. The media caught wind of the story. Wealthy CEO finds love while raising orphaned niece. But Oliver's PR team managed to keep the coverage respectful. Matthew even called to express his support, admitting that seeing them together at the hearing had changed his mind. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Oliver had progressed to only burning things occasionally now. Sophie made an observation that stopped them both. "You know what's funny?" she said, carefully tearing lettuce for the salad. "Daddy always said Uncle Oliver needed someone to teach him how to be happy again, and now Anna did that, just like he wanted." Oliver exchanged a look with Anna, thinking of Richard's letters, his careful documentation of Oliver's life even during their estrangement. "Your daddy was very wise," Anna said softly. "He would have loved you," Sophie declared confidently, "almost as much as we do." Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Oliver found Anna in their rooftop garden. She stood among the thriving herbs and flowers, evidence of how she'd brought life and growth to every part of their world. "Sophie's right," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Richard would have loved you. He would have said you were exactly what this family needed." Anna leaned back against him. "This family is exactly what I needed too." She turned in his arms. "I never thought I'd find this. A love that includes not just romance, but real purpose, real connection." As they stood there under the stars, Oliver realized that his brother's last gift to him hadn't just been Sophie. It had been this chance at complete happiness, at understanding what truly mattered in life. What he didn't know then was that their greatest challenge still lay ahead. one that would test this newfound happiness in ways none of them could have anticipated. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by the garden they'd grown together, everything was perfect. The letter from Boston Children's Hospital arrived on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday morning. Oliver found it mixed in with his regular mail, the hospital's logo making his heart skip a beat before he even opened it. Inside was news that would shake their carefully constructed happiness to its core. Preliminary genetic testing suggests a high probability, Oliver read, his hands growing cold. Immediate follow-up recommended. Uncle Oliver? Sophie's voice broke through his rising panic. She stood in the doorway, backpack ready for school, concern crossing her small face. Are you okay? You look like when Daddy got scary news. Oliver quickly folded the letter, forcing a smile. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Ready for school? But Sophie's words haunted him throughout the morning. Had Richard looked like this when he first suspected something was wrong? Had he known somehow that his daughter might have inherited the same genetic condition that had taken their mother far too young? In his office at work, Oliver finally allowed himself to read the entire letter again. The hospital's genetic screening program had flagged concerning markers in Sophie's latest routine blood work, the same markers that had predicted his mother's early onset condition. His hands shook as he dialed Anna's number. Oliver? She answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. The school nurse called. Sophie's having headaches again. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I'm coming home. There's something we need to discuss. An hour later, they sat in their living room while Sophie napped in her room. The letter lay between them on the coffee table like a live grenade. We need to schedule the follow-up testing immediately, Anna said, her teacher's instinct for practical action taking over. And we should consult with genetic counselors about... I can't lose her too. Oliver's voice broke. Not like Mom, not like Richard. Anna moved to sit beside him, taking his hands in hers. Listen to me. Medical science has advanced significantly since your mother's time. Even if Sophie has the markers, there are treatments, preventive measures. She's so young, Oliver interrupted. She's already lost so much. How do we tell her that she might? He couldn't finish the sentence. Together, Anna said firmly. We tell her together and we face whatever comes together. The next few weeks became a blur of hospital visits and consultations. Sophie, brave as always, faced the blood draws and tests with quiet determination, clutching Hoppy tightly while Oliver and Anna took turns distracting her with stories. Will I get sick like Grandma? She asked one evening, curled between them on the couch. The question they'd been dreading. We don't know yet, sweetheart, Anna answered honestly. But what we do know is that you have the best doctors looking after you, and Uncle Oliver and I will be with you every step of the way. Oliver pulled out Richard's notebook, which had become a source of comfort for all of them. Want to hear about the time your dad and I built a blanket fort hospital when Mom was sick? We pretended we were famous doctors who could cure anything. As he read, Oliver caught Anna wiping away tears. They'd found several entries where Richard had expressed fears about Sophie's health, wondering if he should have had her tested earlier. The guilt in his brother's words mirrored Oliver's own emotions now. The preliminary results came back positive. Sophie had inherited the genetic markers that had taken their mother and potentially contributed to Richard's reckless driving on that fatal night. The doctors recommended immediate preventive treatment. Oliver threw himself into research, using his corporate connections to consult with leading specialists worldwide. Anna coordinated with Sophie's school to accommodate her new medical schedule, while maintaining as much normalcy as possible. One night, after a particularly difficult day of tests, Oliver found Anna in their rooftop garden crying quietly among the herbs Sophie had planted. I keep thinking about her college graduation, Anna said when she heard him approach. Her wedding day. All the moments we need to be there for. We have to fight this, Oliver. We have to find a way. Oliver wrapped his arms around her. We will. Whatever it takes. Experimental treatments, clinical trials, anything. I won't let history repeat itself. Inside, Sophie called out from a nightmare, a frequent occurrence since the hospital visits began. They rushed to her room, finding her clutching Richard's photo. "I dreamed about Daddy," she whispered as they sat on either side of her bed. He was in his special room writing in his notebook. He said not to be scared because love is stronger than scary things. Oliver exchanged a look with Anna over Sophie's head. "Your daddy was right about that," he said softly. "Love is the strongest medicine there is." The next morning, Oliver made two significant decisions. First, he appointed his COO as interim CEO, effectively stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on Sophie's care. Second, he called Matthew. "We need to talk about Lauren's family medical history," he said when Sophie's uncle answered. "And I could use your help navigating this. You knew Mom better than I did at the end." Matthew's response surprised him. "I'll be on the next flight to Boston. Lauren, she would want me there for Sophie now." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, a new normal they all cherished even more now, Sophie made an announcement. "I want to start my own notebook," she declared. "Like Daddy's, for when I'm better so I can remember how brave we all were." Anna had to leave the room for a moment. Oliver heard her muffled sobs from the hallway but kept his attention on Sophie. "That's a wonderful idea. What should we write first?" "That love is the best medicine," Sophie said decisively, "and that sometimes the scariest parts of our story turn into the most important parts." Oliver thought of his mother's illness, how it had driven him to succeed at any cost, pushing away emotions and connections. He thought of Richard's death, how it had brought Sophie into his life and led him to Anna. Now facing this new challenge, he understood something his brother had known all along, that love wasn't a weakness in the face of loss, but the very thing that made survival possible. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep between them on the couch, her new notebook clutched to her chest, Oliver turned to Anna. "Marry me," he said quietly. "Not someday, not eventually, now." Sophie's right. The scary parts of our story matter, but so do the beautiful parts. I want us to face whatever comes next as a real family, legally and completely. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered, careful not to wake Sophie. 1,000 times yes. What they didn't know then was that their love, this fierce, protective, all-encompassing love they'd built together, would become their greatest weapon in the battle ahead. As Sophie slept peacefully between them, her new notebook ready to record their journey, they couldn't have imagined how their story would inspire others facing similar battles, or how their unconventional family would redefine what it meant to triumph over tragedy. The Boston Children's Hospital cafeteria had become their second home over the past few weeks. Oliver sat at what they now considered their table, watching Sophie show Anna her latest notebook entry while they waited for her treatment to begin. "I'm writing about the wedding," Sophie explained, her excitement momentarily overshadowing the pallor that had become common since starting preventive therapy. "Can I be the one who carries the rings?" "Of course you can," Anna smiled, squeezing her hand. "You're the most important part of this wedding." Oliver marveled at how his niece's face lit up at the prospect of their small, hastily planned ceremony. When they'd told her about their engagement, her first response had been to ask if they could have it at the hospital. "So all my doctor friends can come too." The idea had seemed absurd initially, but the more they thought about it, the more right it felt. This place, which should have represented only fear and illness, had somehow become part of their family's story too. "Mr. Crawford?" Dr. Chen, Sophie's primary specialist, approached their table. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" Oliver's heart rate spiked, but he maintained a calm expression for Sophie's sake. "Keep working on those wedding plans," he told her, dropping a kiss on her head before following the doctor. In the corridor, Dr. Chen's expression was cautiously optimistic. "The latest test results are encouraging. The new treatment protocol is showing better response than we initially hoped. However, we'd like to enroll Sophie in a more aggressive preventive program. It would mean more frequent hospital visits, but the potential benefits—" "Whatever she needs," Oliver said immediately. "Cost is no object." Dr. Chen smiled slightly. It's not just the treatment that's helping her. Strong family support systems can significantly impact outcomes. Your daughter is lucky to have both you and Ms. Mitchell. Oliver didn't correct the doctor's assumption about Sophie's relationship to them. In his heart, she had become his daughter in every way that mattered. Back in the cafeteria, he found Anna and Sophie deep in discussion about flower arrangements. Matthew had arrived while he was gone, contributing suggestions from his tablet where he'd been researching hospital-approved decorations. "Uncle Matthew says we can have fairy lights," Sophie reported excitedly. "The doctor said they're okay as long as they're battery-operated." Oliver caught Matthew's eye, nodding gratefully. His former adversary had become an unexpected ally in their battle, bringing not only valuable medical history information, but also a genuine desire to support their unconventional family. "The social worker thinks it's good for her," Anna said later that evening as they prepared dinner. Sophie was napping, tired from her treatments. Having the wedding to focus on, to plan for. It gives her something positive to look forward to. Oliver wrapped his arms around her from behind, breathing in the familiar comfort of her presence. "I never thought I'd be planning my wedding around chemotherapy schedules and blood work appointments. Having second thoughts?" Anna asked lightly, but he heard the underlying uncertainty. "Never." He turned her to face him. "Anna, this isn't how I imagined starting our life together, but it's perfect because it's us. All of us, exactly as we are." A small sound made them turn. Sophie stood in the doorway, Hoppy tucked under one arm and her notebook clutched in the other. "I finished my special page," she announced. "Want to see?" They gathered around the kitchen island as she opened her notebook. Inside, Sophie had drawn a picture of their family: Oliver, Anna, herself, and Matthew, all standing in the hospital garden. Above them, floating in what appeared to be clouds, were Richard and Lauren. "See?" Sophie pointed. "Mommy and Daddy will be at the wedding too, watching from heaven. And look, I drew Hoppy in a bow tie." Oliver had to turn away for a moment, overwhelmed. Anna knelt beside Sophie, her own eyes glistening. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she managed. "It's exactly how it should be." Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, Oliver found Anna in their rooftop garden. The space had evolved, with Sophie's medical herbs now growing alongside their original plants, a living symbol of how they'd adapted to their new reality. "I've been thinking," Anna said as he joined her, "about vows." "What about them?" "The traditional ones don't seem enough. We're not just promising to love each other. We're promising to love Sophie, to fight for her, to face whatever comes together." Oliver pulled out his phone, showing her a draft he'd been working on. Great minds think alike. They spent the next hour crafting vows that encompassed not just their love for each other, but their commitment to Sophie and the family they'd built. When they finally went to bed, Oliver lay awake, thinking about how far they'd come from that first meeting in Martin Wells's office. The next morning brought another round of treatments, but Sophie was in high spirits. She'd convinced her favorite nurse to help her make paper flowers for the wedding, and the activity room had become a crafting headquarters. "Look what we made." Sophie held up a delicate paper rose. "Nurse Jenny says we can make enough for everyone to have one to take home." Oliver watched her work, her small hands careful despite their slight tremor, a side effect of the treatment. The sight filled him with a fierce mixture of love and determination. They would beat this. They had to. "Uncle Oliver?" Sophie's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can I ask you something important?" "Of course. After you and Anna get married, can I call her Mom? I asked Mommy in my dreams if it was okay, and I think she said yes." Oliver felt his throat tighten. "Sweetheart, that's something you should ask Anna." "Ask me what?" Anna appeared in the doorway, returning from her coffee run. Sophie explained her request, her voice small but determined. Anna's coffee cup trembled slightly as she set it down, tears spilling over as she gathered Sophie in her arms. "Nothing would make me happier," she whispered. "Nothing in the whole world." As Oliver watched them embrace, he thought about Richard's final email, about following his heart and choosing happiness over success. His brother had known something then that Oliver was only now fully understanding. That love wasn't just about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about these quiet choices, these daily commitments to put family first. What they didn't know then was that their wedding would become more than just a ceremony. It would become a symbol of hope, not just for them, but for everyone in the hospital who witnessed it. As Sophie continued crafting her paper flowers, her strength growing along with their plans, none of them could have imagined how their story would touch others facing their own battles, or how their love would create ripples of hope far beyond the hospital walls. The Boston Children's Hospital garden had never looked more beautiful. Soft fairy lights twinkled among the trees, and Sophie's handmade paper flowers adorned every available surface. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathered crowd, Oliver stood beneath a simple arch, waiting for his bride. Dr. Chen, nurses and other medical staff who had become like extended family, lined the makeshift aisle. Matthew sat in the front row, holding a tablet that streamed the ceremony to Sophie's former teachers and classmates in Providence. Even Judge Ramirez had come, moved by their story and their request for her to officiate. Sophie appeared first, radiant in her flower girl dress, her strength visibly improved after 3 months of aggressive treatment. Recent tests had shown promising results, giving them all hope for the future. She carried Hoppy, now sporting a dapper bow tie, along with a small pillow holding the rings. Then Anna appeared and Oliver's world narrowed to just her. She wore a simple white dress carrying a bouquet of Sophie's paper flowers mixed with fresh blooms from their rooftop garden. Their eyes met, and in that moment, every challenge they'd faced seemed worth it for this perfect culmination. Dearly beloved, Judge Ramirez began once Anna reached them. We are gathered here today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate the triumph of love over adversity and the creation of a family that defies conventional definitions. Sophie stood between them, beaming as she held both their hands. They had chosen to write their own vows, incorporating promises not just to each other, but to her as well. Oliver went first, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Anna, when you first entered my life, I thought you were there to teach me how to be a guardian. Instead, you taught me how to be human again. You showed me that true strength lies not in controlling life, but in embracing its messiness and magic. He turned slightly to include Sophie in his gaze. I promise to love you both with everything I am. To face whatever challenges come our way with courage and hope. To remember that family isn't about perfection, but about being perfectly there for each other. Anna wiped away tears before beginning her own vows. Oliver, you hired me to help shape Sophie's future, but you ended up transforming mine. You showed me that love isn't just about grand gestures, but about the small daily choices to put family first. She knelt to be at eye level with Sophie. And you, my brave, beautiful girl, I promise to love you as my own, to honor the memory of your parents while helping you build a future filled with joy and possibility. We may not share blood, but we share something even more precious. We share heart. Sophie's own vows, which she had insisted on adding, brought both laughter and tears to the assembled crowd. I promise to help you both remember to smile, even on hard days, to remind you that love is the best medicine, just like Daddy always said, and to keep teaching Uncle Oliver how to cook without burning things. When it came time to exchange rings, Sophie presented them proudly from her pillow. They had chosen simple bands inscribed with a phrase from Richard's notebook, "Love builds the strongest bridges." By the power vested in me, Judge Ramirez proclaimed, I now pronounce you husband and wife, and officially recognize you as a family. The garden erupted in cheers as Oliver kissed his bride. Sophie threw her arms around both of them, creating a family embrace that felt like coming home. The reception that followed was unlike any wedding celebration Boston had seen. Hospital staff mingled with corporate executives, while children from the oncology ward danced with Sophie to music played by a string quartet Oliver's board had insisted on providing. Dr. Chen pulled Oliver aside during the festivities. Latest results came in this morning, she said with a smile. The aggressive treatment is working better than we hoped. Sophie's markers are showing significant improvement. Oliver hugged the doctor impulsively, then rushed to share the news with Anna. They found her helping Sophie distribute paper flowers to young patients who had come to watch the celebration. "Mom," Sophie called out, the word still new and precious to all of them. "Can we plant real flowers in their garden too, like ours at home?" "That's a wonderful idea," Anna replied, meeting Oliver's joy-filled gaze. He nodded, indicating the good news, with a subtle gesture they'd developed over months of hospital visits. Her smile grew even brighter. Later, as the reception wound down, they found themselves back in the garden. Sophie had fallen asleep in Matthew's arms, worn out from dancing but wearing a contented smile. "Look what I found in her notebook," Matthew said softly, showing them the latest entry. Sophie had drawn their wedding, but this time the floating figures of Richard and Lauren were joined by a rainbow and the words, "Now we're all together forever." Oliver held Anna close as they looked at their daughter's drawing. "She's right, you know," he murmured. "We're all connected now, past, present, and future." "Speaking of future," Anna said, turning in his arms, "I have a surprise." She took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We'll need to make room for one more in our family portraits." Oliver stared at her in wonder as the implications sank in. "Are you saying—" She nodded, happy tears spilling over. "I found out yesterday. Sophie's going to be a big sister." The news filled Oliver with a joy he couldn't contain. He kissed Anna deeply, then moved to where Sophie slept, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. His family, expanding, thriving, defying the odds at every turn. As they drove home that night, Sophie drowsy but insisting on sitting between them, Oliver thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first devastating phone call about Richard's death to this moment of pure happiness, every step had led them exactly where they needed to be. The penthouse welcomed them with twinkling lights Sophie had insisted on keeping up, because they make everything magical. Their rooftop garden waited above, ready for new growth and possibilities. And Richard's notebook sat on the coffee table, its pages now supplemented by Sophie's own chronicle of their family's evolution. Oliver helped Anna carry their sleeping daughter to bed, both of them lingering to watch her peaceful rest. In the soft nightlight's glow, he could see hints of the strong, resilient person she was becoming. A perfect blend of Richard's determination and Lauren's grace, enhanced by Anna's compassion and his own newfound capacity for unconditional love. "What are you thinking?" Anna whispered as they finally retreated to their room. "About Richard's last email to me," Oliver replied, "about choosing happiness over success. I didn't understand then, but he was right. This, our family, our love, our future together. This is the greatest success I could have ever imagined." Anna's response was interrupted by Sophie appearing in their doorway, Hoppy in tow. "Can I sleep with you tonight? Just because it's special?" They welcomed her into their bed, creating a cocoon of warmth and security. As his daughter and wife drifted off to sleep beside him, Oliver sent a silent thank you to his brother. Richard's final gift hadn't just been Sophie. It had been this chance to understand what truly mattered in life, to build something more precious than any corporate empire. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and adventures. There would be more hospital visits, more treatments, more battles to face. But they would face them together, their love growing stronger with each test, their family expanding to embrace whatever the future held. As Oliver finally drifted off to sleep, he remembered something Sophie had written in her notebook. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that surprise us. Their story had certainly surprised him, taking him from a solitary existence to this rich tapestry of love, hope, and family. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was better than anything he could have imagined. It was the life he was meant to live. What would you sacrifice for love? In the story, we saw Oliver give up his position as CEO, his meticulously organized routine, and his vision of success to become the father Sophie needed. What was the moment in your life when you had to choose between maintaining control or giving in to the unpredictable path of love? How did that decision transform you? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories. Happy New Year, our channel family. May God greatly bless each and every one of you, bringing much health, love, peace, and joy into your lives. May 2025 be a year full of prosperity, achievements, and unforgettable moments. Thank you for being part of our journey, and may we live even more exciting and inspiring stories together next year.